Welcome back everyone, this is going to be my Venom 2 trailer video. We finally got our first official look at the Carnage symbiote. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs here and some Spider-Man Easter eggs, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. There is a lot of Spider-Man related movies coming in the next couple of years. Also explain some of the connection between the events of Venom 2 because there's some Easter eggs connecting it to the Morbius movie, which is meant to be a direct spin-off of the Venom franchise, and connecting that to Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3 No Way Home. You also notice that on page 2 here, it reads Avengers in the title, so they're clearly trying to cross this over with the MCU. It's been a couple years since the events of the last film. They start the trailer inside Eddie's apartment. It's the same apartment from the first Venom film, so he hasn't moved or anything, but they show you what it's been like living with the Carnage symbiote for the last couple of years, and it's sort of like they've turned into this weird couple, and they try to play it for a little bit of comedy, like just everything is all over the place, is crazy, it looks like a nightmare. You can see the symbiote has basically been trying to take care of everything for him and is driving him crazy. And even though it doesn't really look particularly appetizing, it does manage to cook him breakfast as messily as possible. The symbiote is kind of like a goat. It could digest anything, inorganic matter. He could eat a tin can like a goat and it would still be able to digest it. That's why they have all the jokes about not eating people. Like literally they open on that joke in his apartment while it's cooking breakfast. No eating people. The song that's playing is that Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald song, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, and that's just a metaphor about their relationship before they start with a different song, One is the Loneliest Number, about a couple of the different relationships during the trailer. Like there's the idea of the implied relationship between the Carnage symbiote and the Venom symbiote. They also use that Loneliest Number song to play on his relationship with Anne Wang and play on Cletus Cassidy's relationship with Shriek, his girlfriend from the comics in the Maximum Carnage storyline, which they're actually basing most of the movie on. They're mixing a couple different Carnage and Venom stories from the Spider-Man comics, so they're mixing the Maximum Carnage storyline with his origin story, which are completely separate in the comics. I don't know how I feel about the Venom symbiote singing that song, but it does a good job of showing you how they've changed the way they've tuned the Venom voice. So the Venom voice is actually just Tom Hardy's voice processed in a very different way. It's the exact same way they're going to be doing the Carnage voice as well, but you don't hear the Carnage voice. You only see Carnage and then you hear Cletus Cassidy speaking when he's not Carnage. But throughout the trailer, you see him reading the Daily Bugle's website, which is our first big Spider-Man Easter egg, and it probably has something to do with the article that the detective is reading in the separate scene in the print version of the Daily Bugle. Now, the other really important Easter egg here for the Spider-Man movies isn't just for the Tom Holland Spider-Man, it's actually for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, because the Daily Bugle logo on this here is the same logo from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I'll explain what Kevin Feige said about crossing those characters over in a second. He talked about Tom Holland jumping cinematic universes like he jumps the multiverse. We also have the idea that Spider-Man 3 No Way Home is incorporating some Spider-Verse, multiverse elements in the film. So that could be one of the ways they explain all these inconsistencies, because it seems like Venom 2 wants to make a lot of references to the Sony Spider-Man movies, including the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man films, because we have the Ravencroft Institute, which was featured heavily during the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when they were setting up the Sinister Six. They brought back Mrs. Chen, and they've explained that she knows all about what's going on with the Venom symbiote. They have the twist on the joke from the first Venom movie trailer, where they had him eating that guy who was actually trying to hold the convenience store up. Only this time, apparently the whole idea is that in the couple years since the events of the first film, he's been protecting her and she's been paying him back, quote unquote, paying the symbiote back for protecting her in exchange for some special chocolate, which apparently is late and the Venom symbiote is furious about and wants to eat her. No, we can't eat Mrs. Chen. Wait, what? What are you talking about? They jump back and forth between a couple prisons in the film. You have the state penitentiary that Cletus Cassidy was being held in during the first film. He's still there. He's on death row. But then they also flash with Shriek, his girlfriend, who's in New York City, inside the Ravencroft Institute on the other side of the country. Also New York City, kind of in the area where Spider-Man is. So you can see they're slowly moving the plot of Venom 2 to the New York City area to put him in proximity with the Spider-Man character. And even though you don't see it during the events of the trailer, they kind of imply that the Carnage symbiote makes its way to New York City to try and free her after it escapes from prison. The director of this movie is Andy Serkis. He actually did some commentary clarifying that during the events of this film, the characters are unaware that Spider-Man himself exists. This is the clip of him talking about that.
Obviously, there are links between Venom and Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe and the Spider-Man story. But in this, we're treating this very much as it's his own world. The Venom story is his own world. There are nods and little moments that you just like this newspaper, the Daily Bugle, of course. But on the whole, he's unaware. They are unaware at this point of other characters like Spider-Man. That's the way we've chosen to play this particular episode of the movie. But well, we'll wait and see. We'll see what little things you can pick out of it.
You see that Eddie is still going to see Cletus Cassidy. The way they explain it during the trailer is that article about the hidden victims of Cletus Cassidy, apparently trying to find all these hidden bodies that the authorities never found when they initially captured him. But they never fully explain how the Carnage symbiote is created, where it comes from during the film. I'm assuming for now, without more footage, that it's just based on the comic book explainer that it spawns from the Venom symbiote. And at some point during some of their meetings when he's in the prison, it spawns, Eddie doesn't realize what's going on, then the Carnage symbiote just bonds to the first thing that it finds, which happens to be Cletus Cassidy. That's basically what happened in the comic book version, only in the comic book version, Eddie Brock was inside the prison cell with Cletus. They were cellmates, and when the Venom symbiote came to break Eddie out of prison, the Offspring bonded with Cletus Cassidy, and you have the Carnage symbiote. Then Cletus Cassidy narrates the rest of the trailer, talking about their relationship, while they sort of intercut with the other relationships during the film, like Anne Wang in the Shriek character. But we have to say how they mercifully cut his hair. I'm so happy that they got rid of that weird wig from the first Venom movie. They intercut with Venom taking out more criminals on the streets. Remember the bargain that he made with it during the events of the first film? He said, we're only going to hurt bad people. Cletus talks about them leaving people behind as they intercut with the Anne Wang footage. Obviously, she's a big part of this film. She made some comments about doing more Lady Venom scenes during this film, so she might also get the symbiote again briefly during the events of the film. They don't explain too much of what's going on with Shriek, but the whole idea is that Ravencroft is a place where they put the criminally insane and some supervillains with special powers, which it seems like Shriek does have her special powers from the comics. It's basically like a Banshee sonic scream. If you haven't read the Maximum Carnage storyline, Shriek just teams up with the Carnage symbiote during that. Now these scenes are from New York City, so he climbs up on that building next to the gargoyle, looks out over it, they do this big white city shot. They've moved the plot to New York City by this point in the film. Very overt twist on a Spider-Man reference here. So you have Cletus Cassidy, who seems like he's writing a note to send to Eddie Brock, the note that he's actually reading when the symbiote is cooking him breakfast earlier in the trailer. It's got the same red ink on it, so it just seems like he's sending Eddie mail. But you also see the red spider climb up and he smashes it, just meant to be a clever reference to Spider-Man's classic Spider-Bite origin story. But unless they get really twisty though, I don't think his origin story has anything to do with any kind of spider bite. I still think it's going to be a twist on the classic Carnage storyline from the comics. You could also look at him smashing the spider as a reference to him fighting Spider-Man eventually too. I think the whole idea is they would love for Venom and Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, to team up and fight Carnage in a future film. Because that is basically what the Maximum Carnage storyline is, and probably one of the reasons why they saved that title for one of the movies, like why they call this movie Let There Be Carnage instead of just calling it Maximum Carnage. We see him on death row, they're getting ready to execute him, and as they start to pump him full of the drugs that are basically going to kill him, the Carnage symbiote just explodes out of his body. So at this point in the film, he's already gotten the symbiote. We just don't see that happen. And he talks about becoming chaos, which also you could think of as a reference for that classic Carnage storyline with Chthon, the god of chaos. Although I don't think they're even getting close to cosmic during this film, and that's a very cosmic Carnage story. There's this whole idea that there's a prophecy about Carnage inside the Darkhold. They just featured the Darkhold inside the WandaVision series because there's a prophecy about Scarlet Witch in it. Scarlet Witch is crossing over into Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness. In Doctor Strange 2, the movie is coming out right after Spider-Man 3, No Way Home. There's also supposed to be some crossover elements with Spider-Man inside the Morbius movie, and now the Morbius movie has been rescheduled and it's coming out just a couple weeks after Spider-Man 3 No Way Home comes out in theaters. So towards the end of the year, there's going to be a lot of Spider-Man related stuff happening. Now this scene of the building burning down seems like a completely different place than we've seen before, so this might be the orphanage where Carnage grew up as a child, or where Cletus Cassidy grew up as a child. Because a little while later in the trailer, there's a scene of it not burned down, like completely whole, and you see the Carnage symbiote all over it attacking these cars. I believe this scene is also supposed to be in the New York City area, so it's happening later in the film, obviously after Carnage travels to New York City. This is Venom inside New York City, swinging around the buildings using the symbiote, very much like Spider-Man would do. They show you Eddie going to meet with this detective character who seems like is a pretty big person during the film, probably just another person who's trying to pursue Cletus Cassidy. Seems like he's really upset about the idea that he did not discover a bunch of bodies that Cletus apparently buried somewhere. And it seems like the Venom symbiote doesn't like him either, like it's trying to eat him and Eddie has to stop it. This footage of the cell block just seems like it's the cell block where Cletus is being held, and it's in the middle of his big prison break. You guys can let me know what you think about the look of the Carnage symbiote during the film. It looks like they're trying to base it on some of the more recent comic book designs, but they're trying to make it as red as possible without actually making it deep, saturated red. Like they want it to look as different from the Venom symbiote as possible while still making it look kind of like the Venom symbiote. It looks like this is happening in some sort of industrial park, probably before a big fight scene with the Venom symbiote. Then they end the trailer with a sort of post-credit scene, like the trailer has its own post-credit scene with Carnage inside the church in front of that stained glass window. So obviously there's a big church fight scene, which is a cool reference to the comic book origin of Venom, which they obviously changed during the events of the first film. Because of all these Tobey Easter eggs during the film with the Daily Bugle, it kind of makes you think of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3 movie, where they did try to do a comic book accurate version of Venom's origin story with the church bells. Very biblical, putting him in front of this church in the stained glass window. That also kind of gets into the prophecy in the Darkhold about Carnage being the end of the world, this big prophecy about how he's going to bring about this great destruction. I know a lot of people are wondering if they're ever going to get to Null, the god of the symbiotes, in any of these Venom movies. That would be like their version of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. I think Sony would love to build up to a cosmic story that big, but I have no idea if they're going to get there. And I think right now, they're mostly just focused on crossing over Tom Holland's Spider-Man with the Venom franchise. Then if the rumors are to be believed, more live-action Spider-Verse action because you have all the rumors about Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield coming back as their versions of Spider-Man. But just a big reminder, the movie is coming out September 23rd, couple months before Spider-Man 3 No Way Home, so we'll see what other Easter eggs they have in trailers later this summer. There'll be more trailers in the next couple of months. But everybody just let me know if you spotted any Easter eggs in the trailer that I didn't talk about during the video. Obviously because of all the implied Spider-Man Easter eggs during the Morbius trailer, and Morbius was originally supposed to come before Venom 2, I think we're all expecting some sort of legit Tom Holland cameo scene, like a post-credit scene explaining how he eventually crosses over. There was also the Easter egg from the Morbius movie with the Daily Bugle article, same version of the Daily Bugle because it's the same logo, which says, "Where is Spider-Man?" But this is supposed to happen during the Morbius movie, not Venom 2. Hopefully in the next Morbius trailer, they'll have more overt Spider-Man references that'll kind of clarify what's going on with their Spider-Man Easter eggs. And we will get a brand new Spider-Man 3 No Way Home trailer sometime really soon, too. Of course, I'll do videos for everything. We also have the Loki episodes that are coming up. That'll be the next big series that I'll be doing videos for, so make sure you have alerts enabled so you don't miss any of those episodes. While you wait for everything, click here for my Morbius trailer Easter eggs, and click here for my brand new Marvel What If trailer and learn all about the multiverse Avengers team that they're putting together on that show. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.